Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time I am joined by Brandon from What About Nodnarb. You may know of him, we usually do the podcast together, but this time around I'm going on vacation, so I'm going to be away for a little bit, and there's a few different video topics I wanted to talk about, and we're not going to be doing the podcast until I get back, and you guys may have heard that my cat Onyx passed away, the cat that was kind of part of the podcast, so, you know, there's a little bit of grieving that's maybe also going on right now. But either way, you know, there's some things I want to talk about. So there's going to be like a 3-part series you're going to see come out on the channel, 3 different like topics that Brian and I thought would be interesting to discuss while I was gone. They can sort of, you know, they can, well, not while I was gone, but they could come out while I'm gone, and I think you guys would enjoy them. So the first one is related to Kirby. Kirby may be seeing a few new games coming out in the near future. We usually see several Kirby games come out per generation. The last major Kirby game we got was Kirby Star Allies. It came out in 2018. We have seen interviews and articles come out that HAL is putting something together, something big, something ambitious, and a lot of speculation has been that it would be like a big 3D Kirby game. So the first sort of topic we're going to be focusing on for this first video while I'm gone is about Kirby and how would a 3D Kirby game work, or if not 3D, how would any sort of game work in terms of being more ambitious and a bigger evolution of the series compared to Star Allies. So I'm going to shut up for a moment and let Brandon say hello.
Hey guys, it's me. You've never met me before. Nobody's ever seen me. New to the channel, and you know, great to be here.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited to talk about some stuff. We got some good video concepts, and of course, you gotta start with good old Kirby. Pink Puffball of Doom.
Right. But yeah. So I mean, Brandon, like, firstly, do you feel like there is a 3D Kirby game in the works, or do you think it's just gonna be another Star Allies like thing? Like, what are they gonna do to push this series? Like, if this next Kirby game is supposed to be the most ambitious, biggest Kirby game yet, where could they go to do that? I think a 3D Kirby game would be that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 3D. What do you think?
I feel like 3D's the way that they should go. As far as the way that they will go, that's a much more hard question. Because I feel like they've been doing the same kind of general formula for a while now. So they do need something to really shake it up, and I think 3D is just a good answer. It's a good idea.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, 3D, right, what would that be exactly? Because technically, Star Allies, for example, has 3D polygons. There are 3D graphics there, but it's all in a side-scrolling perspective. There's not 3D gameplay, it's just 3D visuals, but we're talking about actual gameplay where you move around in a 3D environment, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So
Question
then,
is,
yeah,
like,
how would that work?
What kind of design decisions here? Obviously, I don't think we need open world Kirby or anything. I think we're good. Not every 3D game has to be open world. A little too ambitious, maybe.
Sure, but I mean, so
something level based for sure.
Yeah, and it's got to be a platformer, right? You know, get from point A to B. But and there could be. It doesn't mean it has to be linear. Maybe there is some variety with where you go. But like, for example, if they just make a Mario game and it replaced the Mario model with Kirby, that wouldn't be a Kirby game. That would be a Mario game. So what would make it feel like a Kirby game and still function, you know, as a 3D platformer?
That is a good question.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is they kind
of break down Kirby and kind of
right, like, what is it that makes it Kirby? I feel like one thing that makes Kirby is the ability to inhale enemies and copy those abilities. Like, that's always been a big Kirby staple, copying abilities of your enemies. So that would need to be something in even its 3D Kirby, hypothetically.
How similar that is, sucking in enemies to gain their powers versus like Mario Odyssey, where you're throwing the cap to gain the powers. It's kind of odd how similar
Sure.
that actually is.
Sure, there is some similarities there, but I guess
You're
with
not
this one,
controlling. You're still Kirby.
you're still Kirby though, right? So you are defeating that enemy, and you are absorbing that power. And we've seen in some Kirby games them sort of try to mix it up a little bit, where perhaps you combine powers, right? Or maybe you push those powers, evolve those powers. So I think that still has got to be there. So even if it's in a 3D Kirby environment, the inhaling and copying of those abilities and perhaps mixing that up a little bit, stacking some of those power-ups to do more crazy things, like that's still going to be a big part of this hypothetical 3D game. Like, it's possible it's a 3D game. We don't know if it's going to be 3D. It may be. A lot of people seem to think so. And maybe, but definitely they got to have that copy ability.
Maybe the best way for them to push forward the 3D Kirby would be, instead of trying to go full ambitious like a Mario Odyssey style 3D platformer, maybe they go for something that's still like, you know, a lot more 3D, but it's more like 3D World in terms of its scope.
Isn't it funny how I was thinking the exact same thing? Like, we've talked about having like isometric gameplay for Donkey Kong, and that would be neat. Like, I was disappointed when we saw the 3D World gameplay for Super Mario, but if it's for something that's traditionally 2D, I actually would love to see isometric 3D World style gameplay, and I think that could potentially work really well for Kirby.
Yeah. I would hope it feels more designed into the world. It's like one of the things that I'm not super like into 3D World art styles. A lot of it's like suspended platforms, like huge like blocks. It's not like very integrated into the world. It kind of feels like,
very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
It
doesn't even feel like a real environment.
Like, if they were to ever make
it's like a weird alternate
3D
reality.
Mario Maker, you could pretty much make every world in 3D World, right? Like, I definitely, I agree with you. I think if they were to make a Kirby game, I don't want it to feel cookie cutter like Mario. I'm not saying all Mario games feel cookie cutter, but specifically with 3D World, it does. I would like it to feel very crafted, very organic, very dynamic with the environment, right? Like, I'm all 100% with you there. But in terms of the gameplay, sure, we are exploring these worlds that are Kirby-esque, but it is from a perspective that's no longer a side-scrolling perspective, but, you know, a third-person perspective that's perhaps semi-top-down, you know, that isometric style gameplay, and maybe the camera's not fully dynamic in that you can move all around, but just simply get some angles. But that's fine, because for Kirby, that's already a big step up, right? That's already sort of challenging some of the dynamics we've seen in Kirby beforehand. But in order for it to still feel like Kirby, one element that we've already kind of agreed on is they still need to sort of maintain that copying ability. So that's all there. But what else beyond that? I think another thing that's always been very Kirby is his platforming options, right? It's not jumping, it's floating, like sort of flying up. Like, that's still going to be kind of part of who Kirby is, right? And maybe
I think the levels need to be much more vertical.
Verticality, yeah.
3D World, yeah.
Sure, that's a great point. And perhaps that could actually benefit Kirby, that isometric gameplay, because if it is semi-top down, not entirely top down, but, you know, like if you just play 3D World, you know what I mean. Like, you can see more of that top-down view, so you can get a better perspective of where Kirby's going in the environment. It's easier to sort of visualize where you're going, and platform's a little easier. So I think that would actually work really well. So basically, you know, Kirby's still sort of floating around doing his thing, still copying abilities, but it is from that perspective. Now, because there's going to be a lot of floating around, that will sort of yield perhaps a slower paced style of gameplay for your traditional sort of third-person platforming game. So maybe the stages might be a little bit on the smaller side. Although if you look at 3D World, those games were already a little bit small. Or they think of options to speed up Kirby's movement. Because if he has that floaty sort of style of flying, like, then they got to do something to speed it up as well, right? Now, there are some power-ups we've seen in Kirby that do kind of speed things up a little bit. Like, there's the fireball, the traditional fire sort of power-up that shoots you forward with a fireball. Maybe you can do that from the air. Like, that could be a possibility. And maybe, you know, there is this pressure to acquire power-ups in this 3D environment, so you can find ways to progress. Maybe you can't progress until you find certain powers. So the environment is constructed in a way where it's sort of like a puzzle, And the way you solve it is by
Yeah.
finding the power-ups and utilizing them in the right way to progress.
It could definitely be cool. You could also have like multiple paths. It's like you get one power up and you can go on one path that might be easier or harder. You can find another power up. Maybe there's even like a secret power up you can find in like the corner of a level, and then you can go down the secret path.
I actually really like that because traditionally with both Kirby and Yoshi games, they are actually pretty easy compared to say like a Mario or a Zelda game. And that's just how it's always been. However, with Kirby and Yoshi games, there's always like that secret collectible option that's actually pretty challenging. Yeah. So to your point, there could be a secret power-up that you could find that will allow you to go through a different path that will be far more challenging. I actually really like that idea. I think that could work really well. So anyway, sort of continuing my thought though, right? So like, what like if that were to happen, and say you were go down like this harder path, then maybe you fight the same boss, but something happens to the boss to make it even more challenging. Like maybe there is like this overarching enemy that sees that you progress in this way and like, no. So they dump like some sort of like evil fuel power thing on it and it consumes it, something like a malice, and it becomes an even tougher version of the boss you would have fought because you chose the more difficult path. Or maybe you have an ailment that kind of makes that harder, right? Like that's like a possibility, and maybe that's one way they could sort of offer up difficulty for the game, but it'd still be entirely optional, and it would still sort of fit in with the Kirby style of gameplay to always have like that harder sort of difficulty, but it's hidden behind some sort of collectible or something like that.
Yeah, it's always the collectibles and getting 100% that makes those games more challenging. So I would like to see some good puzzles, some good hidden stuff, some good challenging platforming for some of the harder collectibles will definitely be good. And having separate routes is a great way to do that. It could just also have just completely different bosses at the end, kind of like some Star Fox levels. But
right, it doesn't even have to be
a little too ambitious.
Maybe, right? But maybe what they focus on isn't necessarily length, but replayability, which makes sense for me. I've never really considered Kirby games to be long games, but if there are multiple branching paths within these different worlds, and there's different things you can do in different ways, and each one gives you a different sort of collectible that perhaps unlock maybe like a secret world at the end or something like that, that I think would be really cool, and I think that would function really well for this hypothetical 3D Kirby game.
You know what would be cool? I was watching, I can't remember the name of the Kirby game. Somebody in the comments might know. But there is a Kirby game, I think it's made for like the Game Boy Advance or something, where you can have 4 players and it's like one big Kirby map. And so you guys just spread out and like you can go different paths and different worlds, and it's just like this one big like kind of open world 2D Kirby game. And it's super cool. So it would be cool if they had like a 3D version of that same concept, where there's like multiple paths and worlds.
Is it Kirby and the Amazing Mirror or
big...
Nightmare in Dreamland?
Probably the Amazing Mirror.
Okay.
So I think Nightmare in Dreamland is a single player title, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Amazing Mirror is multiplayer.
Yeah, so if they went like a 3D Amazing Mirror, that could be something really cool.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, like, I would love, like, actually that will work really well, because if this is isometric gameplay for Kirby, what was 3D World with this isometric gameplay? A multiplayer 3D Mario. So imagine a multiplayer or co-op Kirby game. They were already experimenting with co-op with Star Allies. Perhaps they do it again, but this time it's in 3D, similar to 3D World. I think that would work really well. And since we're already talking about multiplayer, a lot of Kirby games actually have built-in minigames. Do more of that. Why not? And heck, while we're at it, what if they throw a bone and they have like a Kirby Air Ride minigame? Like, what if? It's already in 3D. What if you play around with that? Like, there's some time trial modes where you can maybe do, not entirely like Kirby Air Ride exactly, right? But it's something that pays homage to that, where you actually are on your Warp Star and you're flying through these environments, and it's like a time trial for like, say, the 6 different worlds. So there's 6 different tracks, and you can sort of do it with
like
co-op.
Flying segments in the game.
Yeah, what if?
Cool.
What if? And it sort of kind of takes advantage of the 3D engine they created, and it's just another way to sort of enjoy the beautiful visuals for this potential Kirby game.
Yeah, they could have like a time trial one where you gotta like fly through the rings and stuff. They could have, I mean, they could have whole bosses where you're like kind of flying towards the boss, maybe.
Star
And then
Fox.
you're moving across the screen. Yeah,
Like Star
something
Fox.
that.
What if?
Yeah.
I could see them doing that. That'd be really
That'd be
cool.
really cool.
You know, I feel like we've kind of come up with a pretty good concept for a Kirby game, and I actually believe that if they do go in the direction of creating a 3D Kirby game, what we sort of touched on would be close to what it is. Like, doing the isometric gameplay, one that's not as challenging to do, it's not as big of a jump as, say, something like Super Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild, for example, not a full open world or open sandbox Kirby game, but it's still 3D, there's still an openness to it, and there still would be the copying abilities, and perhaps those different copying abilities, what you choose can lead to sort of branching paths. You still would have Kirby being able to fly around in the way he's done in previous games, but, you know, the different power-ups could affect how he maneuvers himself, not just on the ground, but in the air as well. And because it is designed that isometric style of gameplay similar to 3D World, that does open it up to be a co-op or multiplayer Kirby game, which we've seen them sort of play around with before many times, so it actually might work really well this time around as well. And on the note of multiplayer, they probably will have some mini games as they have done in the past, and I think all that together with the harder difficulty options with those rarer sort of power-up like sort of routes would be a really, really cool Kirby game. So I can see them doing something similar to what we discussed if they go in that direction for the next Kirby.
For sure. I think it could be really something special, a good jumping off point for a new era of Kirby games, a new style of Kirby games. And I think it could be really something special. I just hope they take some of our ideas. All the, Nintendo, all the people at HAL listening to this, you got it. Also, make sure you add more. I really hope they have more mixing of power-ups.
Yeah.
To get some more really unique style of power-ups and do more puzzles with power-ups. Maybe even have some more physics-based ones. I think that could be cool.
Yeah, like what if with say you use Fireball Kirby and that actually just burns grass,
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of stuff I was thinking. That'd be cool.
Yeah, be
more
awesome.
Just you find some water in the lava, you can freeze it and maybe take a different path now.
That would be how it would work. Like maybe you can't go through the water. Maybe it's not normal water. Maybe it's like a poisonous water, and the only way you could traverse it all the way is by freezing it. Then you can get to the other side, and all of a sudden that's a whole other path you can explore, and it leads to a different sort of ending for that level. That would be really cool. That's a great idea, Brandon. Just combine different power-ups to do different things and using physics-based options to progress. Nintendo, HAL, I hope you're taking notes, because
write this down. I
really like some of the ideas we have for this potential Kirby game. So maybe some of those things actually end up happening in the next one, but we shall see what happens. But yeah, guys, that's all for this one recording here. There will be more coming throughout the week, so stay tuned, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
See you guys.